You know, surviving 67 years on this earth teaches you a lot about people, but nothing could have prepared me for the day my own daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and told me I didn't belong in my own home. I let her talk. I let her say every cruel word she had brewing in that bitter heart of hers, and then I handed her something that would change everything forever. My name is Margaret, and this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the greatest act of love requires the hardest sacrifice you'll ever make. It was a Tuesday morning in October when my world turned upside down. The autumn leaves were just beginning to change, painting the neighborhood in those warm amber and crimson tones that had always reminded me why I fell in love with this house 42 years ago. Robert and I had bought this place when Michael was just 3 years old, back when the American dream still felt achievable on a teacher's salary and a mechanic's wages. Every corner of this house held memories: Michael's first steps across the hardwood floors, birthday parties in the backyard, Christmas mornings around the fireplace, and the quiet evenings when Robert would read to us both in the living room. Robert passed away 3 years ago, and the silence in this house had become both my greatest comfort and my deepest pain. Michael, now 38 and married to Sarah for 6 years, had been suggesting more and more frequently that maybe it was time for me to consider other living arrangements. He never said it directly, of course. My son was raised better than that, but I could see it in his eyes during our Sunday dinners, hear it in the way he'd pause when I mentioned needing to fix the gutters or how the stairs were getting harder to navigate. Sarah, on the other hand, had no such reservations about speaking her mind. She was one of those women who smiled sweetly in public, but had a tongue sharp enough to cut glass when she thought no one important was watching. I'd noticed the way she looked at my furniture, my family photos, my little collection of ceramic angels that Robert used to bring me from his business trips. She'd run her finger along surfaces, checking for dust, making little disapproving sounds under her breath. When she thought I wasn't listening, I'd heard her on the phone with her mother, complaining about having to visit that old house with all that outdated stuff. But that Tuesday morning, something in Sarah snapped. I was in the kitchen making coffee, the same way I'd done every morning for 4 decades, when she walked in with Michael trailing behind her like a reluctant puppy. Her face was set in determination, and I could tell she'd been building up to this moment for weeks. "Margaret," she began, her voice carrying that false sweetness she used when she was about to deliver a blow. "Michael and I need to talk to you about something important." I turned from the coffee maker, my hand still steady despite the sudden racing of my heart. After 67 years, you develop a sixth sense about these things. I knew whatever was coming wasn't going to be pleasant. "Of course, dear," I replied, gesturing toward the kitchen table where thousands of family meals had been shared. "Would you like some coffee?" "This isn't a social visit," Sarah said, and there it was, the mask slipping already. Michael looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he used to do as a child when he was in trouble. "Mom," Michael started, but Sarah held up her hand to silence him. In that gesture, I saw everything I needed to know about the current state of my son's marriage. "Let me handle this," Sarah said to him, then turned back to me with eyes that had gone cold. "Margaret, we've been thinking about the future, about what's best for everyone involved, and we've come to a decision." I sat down at the table, my coffee growing cold in my hands. "I'm listening." "This house is too much for you to handle alone," she continued, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke. "You're getting older. You can't maintain it properly, and frankly, it's becoming a burden on Michael. Every weekend he's over here fixing something, worrying about you being alone, dealing with whatever crisis has come up during the week." Michael opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah shot him a look that could have frozen fire. "The practical solution," she continued, "is for you to move into one of those nice senior living facilities. You know, where you'd have people to take care of you, activities to keep you busy, friends your own age. You'd be much happier there." I took a slow sip of my coffee, tasting the bitterness that had nothing to do with the brew. "And what would happen to this house?" Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. "Well, naturally, since Michael is your only child and heir, it would make sense for us to take over the house. We could fix it up, modernize it, make it suitable for raising a family. We've been trying for children, and this neighborhood has excellent schools. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Michael was staring at his shoes, his face flushed with embarrassment. Sarah was watching me with the patience of a cat who had cornered a mouse. "I see," I said finally. "And you've already looked into these senior living facilities?" "Oh, yes," Sarah said, her enthusiasm suddenly genuine. "There's a lovely place called Golden Sunset Manor about 20 minutes from here. They have bingo nights, craft activities, even a small library. You'd fit right in with the other ladies there." Other ladies. As if at 67, I had suddenly become interchangeable with every other woman my age, as if my individuality had expired along with my youth. "And you think this is what's best for me?" I asked, my voice remarkably steady. "It's what's best for everyone," Sarah replied. "You'll have professional care, Michael won't have to worry constantly, and we can start building our future in a house that actually belongs to us instead of feeling like guests in someone else's home every time we visit." That last sentence hit me like a physical blow. Guests in someone else's home. This woman had just reduced 42 years of my life, my marriage, my memories, my home, to an inconvenience that was preventing her from getting what she wanted. "I need some time to think about this," I said, standing up from the table. "Of course," Sarah said, but her tone suggested that she considered my thinking to be merely a formality. "But don't take too long. We've already put a deposit down on your spot at Golden Sunset Manor. They said they could have you moved in within 2 weeks." My blood turned to ice. They had already made arrangements. They had already decided my future without consulting me. They had already chosen to erase me from my own life. Michael finally found his voice. "Sarah, maybe we should have discussed the timeline with Mom first." "The timeline is fine," Sarah interrupted. "Margaret is a practical woman. She'll see that this makes sense for everyone involved." After they left, I sat in my kitchen for hours, staring at the coffee cup in my hands. The afternoon sunlight moved across the familiar surfaces, highlighting the little imperfections that made this place home. The slight stain on the wallpaper from when Michael had accidentally thrown a baseball in the house when he was 8. The worn spot on the linoleum where Robert used to stand while he made his morning eggs. The small chip in the countertop from the time I'd dropped a heavy pot while trying to prepare Thanksgiving dinner for 12 people. That night, I called my lawyer, James Patterson. James had been Robert's friend for 30 years, and he'd helped us with our wills, the mortgage refinancing, and all the other legal necessities of a long life lived in one place. "Margaret," James said, his voice warm with genuine concern. "I heard Robert's voice in the background when you called. How are you holding up?" I told him everything. Every word of Sarah's speech, every assumption she'd made, every decision they'd made without me. When I finished, James was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. "I want to understand my options," I said. "This is my house, James. Robert and I paid it off 15 years ago. Michael is listed as the beneficiary in my will, but as of right now, this house belongs to me, doesn't it?" "Absolutely," James confirmed. "You have every right to make whatever decisions you want about your property and your living situation. No one can force you to move, Margaret. No one. But they can make my life miserable if I stay," I said, the reality of my situation settling around me like a heavy blanket. "They can try," James said, "but you have more power here than you think. Do you want me to have a conversation with Michael? Sometimes these situations resolve themselves when people understand the legal realities involved. I considered this, but I knew my son. Michael wasn't the driving force behind this plan. He was going along with it because he thought it was easier than standing up to his wife, because he genuinely believed that someone my age couldn't manage alone, and because Sarah had probably convinced him that I would be happier surrounded by people my own age, playing bingo and doing crafts. "Not yet," I told James. "Let me handle this my own way first." The next few days were some of the loneliest of my life. Michael called twice to check on me, but both conversations felt stilted and awkward. He was clearly feeling guilty about the confrontation in my kitchen, but not guilty enough to stand up to Sarah or reconsider their plan. Sarah didn't call at all, which I suppose I should have been grateful for. I found myself walking through each room of my house, remembering the living room where Robert proposed to me on a snowy Christmas Eve in 1978. The dining room where we hosted Michael's college graduation party, cramming 22 people around a table meant for 8. The master bedroom where I'd nursed Michael through childhood illnesses, where Robert and I had whispered our dreams and fears to each other in the darkness, where I'd held my husband's hand as he took his final breath 3 years ago. In Michael's old bedroom, I stood looking at the walls where his sports posters used to hang, where we'd spent countless hours helping him with homework, where he'd brought girlfriends to meet us during his college years. None of them had been like Sarah. The others had asked questions about the family photos, complimented my cooking, shown genuine interest in the stories Robert would tell about Michael's childhood. Sarah had always seemed to be mentally cataloging everything, calculating its value, planning its disposal. That Friday, Sarah called. "Margaret," she said without preamble, "I wanted to give you an update on the arrangements. Golden Sunset Manor can have you moved in this coming Wednesday. I've already scheduled the moving truck for Tuesday morning. We thought it would be easier if Michael and I handled the logistics so you don't have to worry about the details." "You've scheduled a moving truck," I repeated slowly. "Yes, and I've been researching donation centers for your furniture. Most of it won't be suitable for your new living situation. Those places have very specific size requirements. But I'm sure there are charities that would be grateful for pieces in good condition. My furniture. The dining room set that Robert and I had saved for 2 years to buy. The rocking chair where I'd nursed Michael, where I'd spent countless evenings reading or knitting while Robert watched television. The bedroom suite that had been our first major purchase as a married couple. What about my personal belongings?" I asked. "Oh, you can take whatever fits in your new room, of course," Sarah said generously. "I've looked at the floor plans online. You'll have space for a few small pieces, some photos, your clothes, obviously. The important things. The important things." As if this woman had any understanding of what was important to me. "Sarah," I said, "I haven't agreed to any of this." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice had lost its false cheerfulness. "Margaret, be reasonable. You can't stay in that big house alone forever. Something's going to happen. You'll fall down those stairs, or have a medical emergency, or something will break and you won't be able to fix it. Then what? You'll call Michael and he'll have to drop everything to come rescue you. Is that fair to him? And is it fair to me to be forced out of my home?" I asked. "It's not being forced out," Sarah snapped, her patience finally wearing thin. "It's called planning ahead. It's called being practical instead of stubborn. It's called not being a burden on your family." A burden on your family. There it was. The real truth behind all the talk about senior activities and professional care, and what was best for everyone. I had become a burden, an inconvenience, an obstacle to their plans. "I'll call you back," I said, and hung up before she could respond. That weekend, I made a decision that would have shocked everyone who thought they knew me. I called James Patterson again. "James, I want to change my will," I said. "Of course, Margaret. What changes did you want to make?" "I want to leave the house to someone who will love it and take care of it the way Robert and I did. Someone who understands what it means to have a place where you belong." "And who did you have in mind?" I told him. And even though James had been practicing law for 40 years, I could hear the surprise in his voice. "Are you sure about this, Margaret?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The following Tuesday morning, Sarah arrived with a moving truck and 2 men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world. She marched up to my front door like a general leading a charge, clipboard in hand, ready to oversee my eviction. I answered the door in my best dress, the navy blue one with small pearls that I'd worn to Michael's wedding, my hair freshly set, my makeup carefully applied. I looked like I was going somewhere important. "Margaret," Sarah said, consulting her clipboard, "I hope you're ready. The men need to start with the heavy furniture first, And we want to have you settled at Golden Sunset Manor by this afternoon. Actually, Sarah, I said, I need to talk to you before they start moving anything. She sighed dramatically. Margaret, we've been through this. Everything is arranged. The truck is here, the men are on the clock, your room is waiting. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. I'm not trying to make anything difficult, I said. I just have something for you. I handed her an envelope, official and legal looking, with her name written on the front in my careful handwriting. She looked at it suspiciously. What is this? Open it, I said. Sarah tore open the envelope and pulled out the document inside. As she read, I watched her expression change from impatience to confusion, to something that might have been shock. I don't understand, she said finally. It's the deed to the house, I explained patiently. As of yesterday, you and Michael are the legal owners of this property. Congratulations. Sarah stared at the document, then at me, then back at the document. But you said, I thought you didn't want to move. I never said I didn't want to move, I replied. I said I needed time to think, and I did think. I thought very carefully about everything you said. The moving men were looking back and forth between us, clearly confused about whether they should start loading furniture or go back to their truck. You said this house was too much for me to handle alone, I continued. You said it was becoming a burden on Michael. You said I'd be happier somewhere with people my own age, with activities and professional care. You said it would be best for everyone if you and Michael took over the house so you could fix it up and modernize it for raising a family. Sarah nodded slowly, still staring at the deed. So I decided you were right, I said. About everything. But then, where are you going to live? I smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it felt genuine. Well, that's the beautiful thing about giving someone the deed to a house, Sarah. Once it's theirs, they get to decide who belongs there and who doesn't. The color drained from Sarah's face as the implications of what I'd said began to sink in. You see, I continued, when you told me I didn't belong in this house, I realized you were absolutely right. This house belongs to people who love it, who respect it, who understand its history and its value. It belongs to people who would never dream of throwing away 42 years of memories like they were nothing more than outdated furniture. Margaret, wait. The deed is legitimate, I said. James Patterson handled all the paperwork. Everything is legal and binding. The house is yours now, just like you wanted. Sarah was starting to understand, but she was still a few steps behind. But if you've given us the house, then why are you still here? Because you haven't asked me to leave, I said simply. What? You're the owner now, Sarah. If you want me to move out, all you have to do is ask me. After all, you're the one who gets to decide who belongs in this house and who doesn't. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, the trap she'd walked herself into finally becoming clear. She looked at the deed again, then at the moving truck, then at the two men who were getting paid by the hour to stand around watching this bizarre domestic drama unfold. I don't, she stammered. Of course, if you'd rather I stay, I continued conversationally, I'd be happy to continue living here. I could help you learn about the house, which windows stick in the winter, where the circuit breakers are, how to work the temperamental washing machine. I could even help with childcare when you and Michael have those babies you're planning. After all, I have quite a bit of experience with children. Sarah was trapped, and we both knew it. If she asked me to leave, she'd be confirming everything I'd implied about her motivations. That she was cruel enough to throw a 67-year-old woman out of her home. If she asked me to stay, she'd have to live with me indefinitely, sharing the house she'd coveted with the woman she'd tried to discard. The moving truck is costing you money while we stand here talking, I pointed out helpfully. This isn't what we discussed, Sarah said weakly. Isn't it? I asked. You said the house should belong to you and Michael. Now it does. You said I should live somewhere with professional care and structured activities. Golden Sunset Manor is still holding your reservation. You can call them and let them know whether I'll be needing it or not. Ours? Just then, Michael's car pulled into the driveway. He got out, looking confused by the scene. His wife holding legal documents, his mother dressed like she was going to church, two moving men standing beside a truck full of empty dollies, and everyone looking like they'd been frozen in the middle of an argument. "What's going on?" Michael asked, approaching the group cautiously. Sarah thrust the deed at him. "Your mother gave us the house." Michael looked at the document, his confusion deepening. "She what?" "I transferred ownership to you and Sarah," I explained. "Just like you wanted." "But Mom, I never said—" "You didn't have to say anything, sweetheart," I interrupted gently. Sarah explained everything very clearly. "You're worried about me managing alone. You want to start a family in a house that actually belongs to you instead of feeling like guests in someone else's home. This solves all those problems." Michael was reading the deed now, his face growing pale. "Mom, this is your house. Dad built that back deck with his own hands. You planted every flower in the garden. I can't just take this from you." "You're not taking anything," I assured him. "I'm giving it to you. There's a difference." "But where will you live?" I gestured toward the house behind me. "Well, that depends on whether the new owners want me here or not." Michael looked from me to Sarah to the deed in his hands, clearly trying to process what had just happened. Sarah was silent, her face cycling through emotions like a broken traffic light. "I don't understand," Michael said finally. "Your wife came to me last week and explained that I didn't belong in this house anymore," I said, my voice calm and factual. "She made it very clear that my continued presence here was a burden on you and an obstacle to your future happiness. She arranged for me to be moved to Golden Sunset Manor today, and she scheduled this truck to come collect my furniture for donation to charity." Michael's face went red, then white, then red again. He turned to Sarah with an expression I'd never seen before: disappointment, anger, and something that might have been shame. "You did what?" "Michael, you agreed that she needed to move somewhere safer." "I said we should talk to her about options," Michael said, his voice rising. "I never said anything about making arrangements behind her back or scheduling moving trucks or telling her she doesn't belong in her own home." "It's not her home anymore," Sarah said, holding up the deed. "It's our home now. She gave it to us. And why do you think she did that?" Michael demanded. Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again without making a sound. She was beginning to realize that there was no good answer to that question. "Mom," Michael said, turning to me, "what do you want? Really? Not what Sarah wants, not what I want, not what anyone thinks is best for you. What do you want?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised to be kind and thoughtful and strong, who had somehow gotten so turned around in his marriage that he'd forgotten those lessons. I looked at Sarah, whose ambition had finally collided with the reality of what it meant to get everything you thought you wanted. I looked at the house behind me, every window and shingle familiar as my own reflection. "I want to belong somewhere," I said simply. "I want to live in a place where I'm wanted, where my presence is a gift instead of a burden, where the people around me understand that love isn't something you put on a schedule or relocate for convenience." "You belong here," Michael said immediately. "This is your home. It's always been your home." "Not anymore," I said, nodding toward the deed in his hands. "Now it's your home. And Sarah's. The question is whether you want me to be part of your home, or whether you'd prefer I find somewhere else to belong." The silence stretched between us like a held breath. The moving men were pretending to check something on their truck. A neighbor was walking her dog very slowly past our house, clearly trying to eavesdrop on whatever drama was unfolding in the driveway. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I never meant... I wasn't trying to be cruel, Margaret. I just thought... I genuinely believed you'd be happier somewhere with people your own age." "People my own age," I repeated. "Sarah, do you know what people my age talk about in those places?" She shook her head. "We talk about our children," I said. "We talk about our grandchildren. We talk about the homes we used to live in, the gardens we used to tend, the kitchens where we cooked Christmas dinner for 30 years. We talk about the people we love and the places we belonged, and the lives we lived before someone decided we were too old to keep living them. Sarah's eyes were bright with tears she was trying not to shed. I don't want to talk about the life I used to have, I continued. I want to keep living it. I want to make Sunday dinner in the kitchen where I've made it for 40 years. I want to tend the roses Robert planted for our anniversary. I want to see my grandchildren take their first steps on the same floors where their father learned to walk. Then stay, Michael said immediately. Mom, please. Forget about the deed. Forget about what Sarah said. Forget all of this craziness. Just stay. This is your home. Is it? I asked, looking at Sarah. Sarah was crying now, not the pretty tears of a woman trying to gain sympathy, but the ugly, honest tears of someone who had just seen herself clearly for the first time in years. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Margaret. I was so focused on what I wanted that I never stopped to think about what I was taking away from you. I never stopped to think about what this house means to you. And what does it mean to me, Sarah? She wiped her eyes, smearing her makeup. It means everything. It's not just a house. It's your life. It's your history. It's where you built your family and made your memories, and I was trying to take all of that away from you because I wanted something that wasn't mine to take. I nodded slowly. And now? Now I understand why you gave us the deed, Sarah said. You were showing me what it would really mean to get what I thought I wanted. You were showing me what kind of person I was becoming. She held out the deed to me. I don't want it. I don't want to own something that belongs to someone else. Something I didn't earn. Something that isn't mine to have. But it is yours now, I said, not taking the document. The transfer is legal and binding. James Patterson made sure of that. Then I'll transfer it back. You could do that, I agreed. Or you could do something else. What do you mean? I smiled at this young woman who had caused me so much pain, and who was, despite everything, my son's wife and the potential mother of my future grandchildren. You could learn to share it, I said. Sarah stared at me. Michael stared at me. Even the moving men who had given up any pretense of not listening stared at me. You own this house now, I continued. Both of you. That means you get to decide how to use it, who lives in it, how it's cared for. You could ask me to leave, and I would. You could ask me to stay, and I'd be grateful. Or what? Sarah asked. Or you could ask me to help you turn this house into a home for your family. You could let me teach you about the garden, show you which rooms get the best light at different times of day, help you understand why Robert built the back deck at that particular angle to catch the evening sun. You could let me help you learn to love this place the way it deserves to be loved. And in return? Michael asked, because he knew there had to be more to this story. In return, I get to stay in the place where I belong, with the people I love, helping to build the next chapter of our family's story instead of being written out of it. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking. I could see her weighing the options, considering what it would mean to share a house with her mother-in-law, imagining how it might work or how it might not work. What about when we have children? She asked finally. What about it? Won't it be complicated? Having 3 adults and children all living in the same house? I laughed, and the sound surprised me with its genuine warmth. Sarah, this house raised 1 child very successfully. I think it can handle a few more. And besides, when you're dealing with babies who don't sleep and toddlers who don't listen and teenagers who think they know everything, having an extra pair of hands and 40 years of experience around might not be the worst thing in the world. But what about privacy, space, independence? This house has 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a living room, a family room, a dining room, and enough yard space for everyone to find their own corner when they need it, I said. Robert and I designed it to be a place where a family could grow and spread out without anyone feeling cramped or forgotten. Michael was looking back and forth between us like a spectator at a tennis match, clearly afraid to say anything that might upset the delicate negotiation taking place. What about rules? Sarah asked. I mean, If we're all living here together, how would we handle decisions about the house, about everything? Well, I said, you're the owners now. Legally, the decisions are yours to make. But if you wanted my input, I'd suggest we talk about things like adults who love each other and want everyone to be happy and comfortable. And if we disagree about something, then we'll figure it out, I said simply. That's what families do. Sarah was quiet again, and I could see her trying to imagine it. Living in this house with me, sharing the kitchen and the garden and the day-to-day rhythms of domestic life. It wouldn't always be easy, I knew that. We were very different people with different ideas about how things should be done. But we both loved Michael, and we both wanted him to be happy, and maybe that would be enough to build on. I have conditions, Sarah said finally. All right. I want to redecorate the master bedroom. Nothing drastic, just I want it to feel like our space, not like we're sleeping in someone else's room. That seems reasonable. And I want to plant some vegetables in the garden. I've always wanted to try growing my own tomatoes and peppers. Robert would have loved that. He always said the south corner of the yard got perfect sun for vegetables, but we never got around to trying it. And I want to host Thanksgiving sometimes. Not every year, but sometimes. I want to cook the turkey and make the stuffing and have everyone say how good everything is. I smiled. Sarah, I would be delighted to have someone else cook Thanksgiving dinner. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to make a meal for 12 people? 12 people? Well, there's us. And Michael's cousins usually come with their families, and Mrs. Henderson from next door hasn't had anywhere to go since her husband died, and the Johnsons from down the street always bring the most amazing desserts. Sarah's eyes were wide. I was thinking maybe 6 people. We can start with 6, I said diplomatically. Michael finally spoke up. Are you two seriously planning to live together? After everything that just happened? Sarah and I looked at each other, and I saw something in her expression that I'd never seen before. Uncertainty, hope, and maybe the beginning of understanding. I think, Sarah said slowly, that I've been trying so hard to start my own life that I forgot about joining a life that was already in progress. I forgot that when you marry someone, you're not just getting a husband. You're getting a whole history and family and set of traditions and memories that come with him. And I think, I said, that I've been so afraid of losing my place in my son's life that I never stopped to consider that there might be room for all of us if we were willing to make space for each other. So we're really going to try this? Sarah asked. Do you want to try it? She looked at the house, then at Michael, then at me. I think I do. I think I want to learn how to love this place the way you do. I think I want to understand why it matters so much to you, and maybe find out why it could matter to me too. I felt something loosen in my chest, a tightness I'd been carrying for weeks without realizing it. And if it doesn't work? Sarah asked. Then we'll figure something else out, I said. But Sarah, if we're going to try this, we need to promise each other something. What's that? We need to promise that we'll talk to each other when something is wrong, instead of talking around each other or about each other. We need to promise that we'll assume the best of each other's intentions, even when we don't understand each other's actions. And we need to promise that we'll remember that we're on the same team. We both want Michael to be happy. We both want this family to thrive. And we both deserve to feel like we belong somewhere. Sarah nodded, tears starting again. I can promise that. Good, I said. And then I did something that surprised all of us. I hugged her. Not the polite, careful hug we'd exchanged at holidays and family gatherings, but a real embrace, the kind you give someone when you're genuinely grateful for their presence in your life. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered against my shoulder. I'm so sorry for what I said, for how I made you feel. I never wanted to hurt you. I know, I said, and realized that I meant it. I know you didn't. Michael was crying now too, not even trying to hide it. I'm sorry too, Mom. I should have stood up for you from the beginning. I should have told Sarah that any plan for our future had to include you, had to make sure you felt wanted and valued and loved. You're standing up for me now, I said. reaching out to pull him into the hug. That's what matters. The three of us stood there in the driveway, holding each other and crying, and probably looking absolutely ridiculous to the moving men and the neighbor with the dog and anyone else who might have been watching. But I didn't care. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I belonged exactly where I was. Finally, we separated, all of us wiping our eyes and laughing at ourselves for making such a scene in the front yard. "So," Michael said, "what do we tell the moving company?" Sarah looked at the truck, then at the men who had been waiting patiently through our entire emotional breakdown. "We tell them we don't need them today." "And Golden Sunset Manor?" I asked. "I'll call them this afternoon and cancel the reservation," Sarah said. "I'll tell them you've decided to age in place." "Age in place," I repeated, liking the sound of it. "That sounds much better than being relocated for my own good." Sarah laughed, and it was the first time I'd ever heard her laugh without calculation, without considering who was listening or what impression she was making. It was a good laugh, honest and warm. "I guess I should go tell the moving men they can leave," she said. "I'll handle it," Michael offered, but Sarah shook her head. "No, I'll do it. This was my idea, my plan, my mistake. I should be the one to clean it up." I watched her walk over to the truck, watched her explain the situation to the two men who looked relieved to be heading back to their depot with a truck full of empty dollies instead of spending the day hauling furniture. As the truck pulled away, Sarah came back to where Michael and I were standing. "They said they've seen stranger things, but not many," she reported with a wry smile. "I imagine this will make quite a story back at the moving company," I said. "Probably," Sarah agreed. "The lady who gave away her house to prove a point and then moved back in on the same day." "Is that what I did?" I asked, genuinely curious about how she saw it. Sarah considered this seriously. "I think what you did was show me who I was becoming, and then give me a chance to become someone better instead." Michael slipped his arm around both of us. "So what happens now?" "Now we go inside and have some coffee," I said. "And we start figuring out how to be a family." The first few weeks were an adjustment for all of us. Sarah had been right about one thing. Living with your mother-in-law is complicated, even under the best circumstances. We had different schedules, different ideas about how clean the house should be, different preferences for everything from the temperature of the thermostat to the volume of the television. But we talked about it. Every awkward moment, every small disagreement, every time one of us felt frustrated or misunderstood, we sat down at that kitchen table and worked it out. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when I could see Sarah struggling not to say something sharp. Moments when I had to bite my tongue instead of offering unwanted advice. Moments when Michael looked like he regretted not moving to Alaska, where no one would expect him to mediate between the two most important women in his life. Gradually, though, something began to shift. Sarah started asking me about the garden, not because she felt obligated to show interest, but because she genuinely wanted to understand why I spent so much time out there. I started asking her about her work as a marketing coordinator, not because I was trying to make conversation, but because I was curious about this world that was so different from my own experience as a teacher. Michael began to relax, stopped looking like he was waiting for an explosion every time Sarah and I were in the same room together. He started bringing home flowers on Friday afternoons, sometimes for Sarah, sometimes for me, sometimes for both of us to share. 3 months after the moving truck incident, Sarah came to me with a proposal. "Margaret," she said, finding me in the living room where I was working on a cross-stitch project, "I've been thinking about the master bedroom situation." My heart sank a little. We'd agreed she could redecorate, but we hadn't actually done anything about it yet. I wondered if she'd finally decided she couldn't stand sleeping in the room that had been mine and Robert's for so many years. "What about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Well, I know I said I wanted to change things, make it feel like our space instead of yours, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that what I really want is for it to feel like all of our space. Does that make sense?" "Not entirely," I admitted. Sarah sat down on the couch beside me, tucking one leg under herself in a gesture that reminded me of Michael at her age. I've been going through some of the photo albums you let me borrow, looking at pictures of you and Robert and Michael when he was little. And I realized that this house isn't just a place where you used to live. It's a place where love was built, day by day, year by year. It's a place where a family grew and celebrated and grieved and supported each other through everything life brought them. She paused, looking around the room as if seeing it for the first time. I don't want to erase that history, she continued. I want to be part of it. I want our children to grow up knowing about the grandfather they never met, understanding that they're part of something bigger and longer lasting than just their immediate family. What are you proposing? I asked, though I was beginning to hope I understood. I'm proposing that we redecorate the master bedroom together. Not just me imposing my taste over yours, but both of us creating something that honors the past while making room for the future. Maybe we could keep some of Robert's things, mix them with some new pieces, create something that feels like a bridge between generations instead of a replacement. I had to put down my cross-stitch because my hands were shaking too much to hold the needle steady. Sarah, that's one of the most thoughtful things anyone has ever suggested to me. Really? Really. Robert would have loved the idea of his memory being part of your new beginning instead of an obstacle to it. We spent the next Saturday afternoon going through the master bedroom together, deciding what to keep, what to store, what to give away, and what to add. Sarah had an eye for design that I'd never appreciated before, a way of seeing how colors and textures and styles could work together to create something both comfortable and beautiful. She insisted on keeping the small framed photo of Robert and me on our wedding day that had always sat on my nightstand. Every bedroom should have a picture of true love in it, she said. It's good luck. I suggested we keep the antique lamp that had been Robert's grandmother's, and Sarah found a way to incorporate it into a design scheme that was clearly contemporary, but somehow managed to make the old piece look like it belonged. By the end of the day, we had created something entirely new that somehow felt like it had always been exactly as it was meant to be. The room was unmistakably Sarah and Michael's now, but it was also still connected to the history of the house, still part of the continuing story instead of a complete break from the past. How does it feel? I asked Sarah as we stood in the doorway admiring our work. It feels like home, she said, and I could hear the surprise in her voice. For the first time since we got married, it actually feels like home. Spring brought its own revelations. Sarah had been serious about wanting to plant vegetables, and she threw herself into learning about gardening with the same intensity she'd once applied to planning my relocation. She bought books, watched YouTube tutorials, consulted with the experts at the local nursery, and peppered me with questions about soil conditions and planting schedules and pest management. I had no idea it was so complicated, she said one afternoon as we worked side by side in the garden, planting the tomato seedlings she'd been nurturing under grow lights in the basement for 6 weeks. It's not complicated once you understand the rhythm of it, I told her. Every garden has its own personality. This one likes morning sun and afternoon shade, doesn't mind a little clay in the soil, and produces better when you talk to the plants. Talk to the plants? Robert used to tell them about his day while he watered them, said it helped them grow better. I thought he was crazy until I noticed that the plants he talked to always seemed healthier than the ones he ignored. Sarah looked skeptical, but the next morning I caught her having a serious conversation with the pepper plants about the weather forecast. That summer, we had the best vegetable garden the neighborhood had seen in years. Sarah's tomatoes were legendary, her peppers were perfect, and her herbs were so abundant that she started bringing bundles of fresh basil and oregano to the neighbors. The success went to her head a little. She started planning next year's garden in July, talking about expanding into the side yard, researching heirloom varieties and companion planting. I think I've created a monster, I told Michael one evening as we watched Sarah out the window, measuring potential garden beds with a tape measure. A very happy monster, Michael replied. I haven't seen her this excited about anything in years. He was right. Sarah had found something in gardening that she'd been missing without knowing it. The satisfaction of creating something beautiful and useful with her own hands. The connection to the earth and the seasons, and the ancient human tradition of growing food for your family. She was glowing with it, radiant with the joy of discovery. In August, she came to me with news that made all of our adjustments and accommodations and careful negotiations suddenly feel like preparation for something much bigger. "Margaret," she said, finding me in the kitchen where I was canning tomatoes from our abundant harvest, "I need to tell you something." Something in her tone made me turn away from the stove to give her my full attention. She was standing in the doorway with a strange expression on her face, half excited and half terrified. "I'm pregnant," she said. For a moment, I just stared at her, processing the magnitude of what she'd just told me. A baby. Michael's baby. My grandchild. The next generation of our family, growing inside this woman who had once tried to erase me from this very house. "Are you happy about it?" I asked finally. Sarah nodded, tears starting to spill over. "I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed, but yes, I'm happy. We've been trying for so long, and I was starting to think it might never happen." I set down my wooden spoon and crossed the kitchen to hug her, this time without any hesitation or calculation. She was going to be the mother of my grandchild. Whatever our differences, whatever our history, whatever complications still lay ahead, that fact changed everything. "Have you told Michael?" "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." "Why?" Sarah pulled back from the hug to look at me directly. "Because I want this baby to grow up knowing their grandmother. I want them to learn about gardening from you, and hear stories about their grandfather Robert, and understand that they're part of a family with deep roots and strong traditions. I want what we've built here to be their foundation, not just their starting point." I was crying now, too overwhelmed by gratitude and joy and the sheer improbability of how everything had turned out to worry about dignity or composure. "This baby is so lucky," I managed to say. "They're going to have parents who love them, and a home with room to grow, and a garden full of vegetables that their mother planted with her own hands. And a grandmother who knows all the best stories," Sarah added, "and a grandfather watching over them even though he's not here to hold them." We stood there in the kitchen, crying and laughing and marveling at the miracle of new life and second chances and families that find ways to expand their boundaries to include more love than they ever thought possible. When Michael came home that evening, Sarah told him the news over dinner at the kitchen table where so many family announcements had been made over the years. His reaction was everything you could hope for: pure joy, absolute wonder, and immediate protectiveness that extended to both Sarah and me. "Mom," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand, "you're going to be a grandmother." "I'm going to be a very involved grandmother," I corrected. "This baby is going to be spoiled rotten." "Good," Sarah said firmly. "Every child should have at least one grandparent who spoils them rotten." That night, after Michael and Sarah had gone to bed, I sat in the living room thinking about the incredible journey that had brought us to this moment. 6 months ago, I had been facing eviction from my own home, dismissed as a burden and an obstacle to my family's happiness. Tonight, I was an integral part of a growing family, looking forward to holding my first grandchild in the house where their father had taken his first steps. The next 9 months were a whirlwind of preparation, anticipation, and increasingly creative solutions to the logistics of 3 adults and a baby sharing one house. We converted the spare bedroom next to the master suite into a nursery, painting the walls a soft green that would work for either a boy or a girl. Sarah insisted on hand-me-down furniture from my teaching days. The rocking chair where I'd spent countless hours grading papers was perfect for nighttime feedings, and the old bookshelf that had held my classroom library was just right for picture books and stuffed animals. Michael spent weekends baby-proofing the house with an enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. He installed safety latches on every cabinet, covered every electrical outlet, and patted every sharp corner. He researched car seats and strollers and high chairs with the same intensity he'd once applied to choosing a mortgage lender. Sarah's pregnancy progressed smoothly, despite her worries about morning sickness and weight gain. and all the other concerns that consume first-time mothers. She continued working in the garden until she was almost 8 months along, insisting that the fresh air and gentle exercise were good for both her and the baby. I loved watching her in the evenings, one hand resting on her growing belly while she planned next year's plantings. In March, 3 days past her due date, Sarah went into labor at 2 o'clock in the morning. Michael flew into a controlled panic, gathering hospital bags and timing contractions and calling the doctor every 20 minutes to report on their progress. "Mom," he said as they prepared to leave for the hospital, "will you come with us?" I had been hoping he would ask, but I hadn't wanted to assume. "Are you sure?" "I want you there," Sarah said, pausing between contractions to smile at me. "I want our daughter to meet her grandmother as soon as possible. Their daughter." After months of referring to the baby and it, Sarah had finally revealed that they were having a girl, my granddaughter. Robert would have been over the moon. He had always insisted that little girls were more fun than little boys, though he'd loved Michael with every fiber of his being. Lily Margaret was born at 6:47 a.m. on March 15th, after 12 hours of labor that felt like 12 years to everyone involved. She weighed 7 pounds, 2 ounces, had her father's dark hair and her mother's stubborn chin, and was absolutely perfect in every way that matters. I held her for the first time when she was 20 minutes old, still red and wrinkled and completely unimpressed by her introduction to the world outside her mother's womb. She looked at me with those unfocused newborn eyes, and I felt my heart expand in ways I hadn't thought possible at my age. "Hello, sweet girl," I whispered to her. "I'm your grandmother, Margaret. I've been waiting to meet you for a very long time." She yawned, unimpressed by my emotional speech, and fell asleep in my arms. The ride home from the hospital 3 days later was an adventure in logistics and anxiety. Michael drove approximately 15 miles per hour, stopping at every yellow light and taking turns like he was transporting nitroglycerin. Sarah sat in the back seat next to the car seat, watching Lily's every breath. I sat in the front passenger seat, trying not to laugh at the extreme caution being taken to transport one very small, very healthy baby the 6 miles from the hospital to our house. "She's still breathing, right?" Michael asked for the 20th time. "She's fine," Sarah assured him. "Babies are tougher than they look." "Are you sure we shouldn't have stayed another day, just to be safe?" "Michael," I said gently, "you were born in this same hospital, and I brought you home after 2 days. You survived the journey." "That was different," Michael protested. "How was it different? I don't know. I was me. This is Lily. She's so small and perfect and fragile." "You were small and perfect and fragile, too," I reminded him. "All babies are. That's what makes them babies." When we finally arrived home, the house felt different somehow. Not just because of the new car seat by the front door, or the diaper bag on the kitchen counter, or the basket of blankets in the living room. It felt fuller, more complete, as if it had been waiting for this particular small person to make it whole. That first night, I lay in my bed listening to the sounds of new parenthood echoing through the walls. Lily's cries, Sarah's soothing murmurs, Michael's anxious questions about whether the baby was too hot or too cold or hungry or tired or uncomfortable. The sounds that meant life was continuing, growing, expanding into the next generation. The next few months brought all the chaos and joy and exhaustion that come with a newborn in the house. Sarah and Michael were devoted parents, but they were also first-time parents, which meant they approached every aspect of baby care with the intensity of students preparing for final exams. I tried to help without interfering, offering advice only when asked, stepping in to hold the baby when they needed a shower or a nap, or just a few minutes to remember that they were still individuals as well as parents. It was a delicate balance, being present and helpful without being overwhelming or intrusive. "I don't know how you did this alone," Sarah said to me one afternoon when Lily was about 6 weeks old. Sarah looked exhausted, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her shirt stained with various baby fluids, but she was smiling as she watched her daughter sleep in my arms. "I wasn't alone," I reminded her. I had Robert. Still, it's so much work. So much constant attention and worry and decision-making. And we have you here to help us. I can't imagine trying to manage all of this without any support. You're stronger than you think, I told her. All new mothers are. You find reserves of strength and patience and love that you never knew you had. Did you always want to be a mother? It was an interesting question, one that made me think back to my younger self, the woman I'd been before Michael was born. I wanted children, I said slowly, but I'm not sure I understood what I was signing up for. I thought I knew what motherhood would be like, but the reality was so much more complex and demanding and rewarding than anything I'd imagined. Do you think I'm doing it right? Sarah asked, and I heard the vulnerability in her voice that all new mothers carry. There is no right way, I said. There are a million different ways to be a good mother, and you're already finding yours. You're attentive without being anxious, loving without being smothering, protective without being overprotective. Lily is lucky to have you. Even though I don't know what I'm doing half the time, especially because you don't know what you're doing half the time. That means you're paying attention, thinking about what she needs instead of just following someone else's rules. Trust yourself, Sarah. Your instincts are good. As Lily grew from a newborn into an infant and then a baby with personality and preferences, our household found its rhythm. Sarah returned to work part-time when Lily was 4 months old, and I became the primary caregiver during those hours. It was a role I embraced completely, this second chance at nurturing a small person through the earliest stages of life. Lily was an easy baby, quick to smile and slow to fuss, content to lie on a blanket in the garden while Sarah and I worked with the vegetables. She seemed to enjoy the sound of our voices as we discussed plant care and harvest schedules and plans for next season's expansion. She's going to be a gardener, Sarah predicted one afternoon as we watched 6-month-old Lily grab a handful of dirt and examine it with scientific interest before trying to eat it. She's going to be whatever she wants to be, I said, gently extracting the dirt from Lily's mouth. But it wouldn't hurt if she learned to appreciate where food comes from. By the time Lily turned 1, it was clear that our arrangement was working better than any of us had dared to hope. We had developed systems for sharing childcare responsibilities, household chores, and decision-making that respected everyone's needs and contributions. More importantly, we had developed genuine affection and respect for each other that went far beyond mere tolerance or obligation. Sarah had become the daughter I'd never had, someone I could talk to about everything from gardening to politics to the complexities of raising children in a complicated world. Michael had relaxed into fatherhood with a confidence that came from knowing his daughter was surrounded by love and support from every direction. And Lily was thriving in an environment where she was adored by multiple adults who each brought different strengths and perspectives to her care. She had her mother's curiosity and her father's easy laughter, and what I liked to think was her grandmother's appreciation for the small wonders of everyday life. On the anniversary of the day Sarah had tried to move me out of my own house, we had a family dinner to celebrate what we'd started calling our Re-beginning Day. It had become a tradition, this annual acknowledgement of how close we'd come to making a terrible mistake, and how grateful we were for the wisdom to find a better way. I have a confession, Sarah said as we lingered over dessert while Lily napped in her high chair. Last week, my friend Jessica asked me if I ever regretted not getting you moved out of the house before Lily was born. She said she couldn't imagine sharing her space with her mother-in-law, especially with a new baby. What did you tell her? I asked. Sarah smiled. I told her that I couldn't imagine raising Lily without you. I told her that watching you with my daughter has taught me things about mothering that I never could have learned from books or classes or advice from other new mothers. I told her that Lily is growing up with a sense of security and belonging that comes from being part of something bigger than just her immediate family. And what did Jessica say to that? She said I was lucky. And you know what? She's right. We are lucky. All of us. Michael raised his glass of wine. To second chances. To families that grow instead of shrink, Sarah added. To the wisdom to know when you're wrong and the courage to make it right, I contributed. We clinked glasses, And I looked around the table at these people who had become my whole world. My son, who had learned to stand up for what mattered while still honoring his wife's needs and opinions. My daughter-in-law, who had discovered that getting what you want isn't always as important as understanding what you actually need. My granddaughter, who would grow up knowing that love comes in many forms and that families are built through choice as much as chance. As I write this story now, 3 years after that terrible Tuesday morning when I thought I was losing everything that mattered to me, I can honestly say that I've never been happier. Lily is 4 years old, full of questions and energy, and an inexplicable fascination with earthworms. Sarah is pregnant again, a boy this time who will be named Robert in honor of the grandfather he'll never meet, but whose presence is still felt in every corner of this house. Michael has been promoted at work and talks sometimes about the possibility of us all taking a family vacation together. Sarah has expanded the garden to include a small greenhouse where she experiments with starting seedlings and growing herbs through the winter. She's also started a blog about multi-generational living that has attracted readers from around the world who are trying to figure out how to make similar arrangements work in their own families. And I wake up every morning in the house where I belong, surrounded by people who want me here, contributing to a life that is still growing and changing and full of possibilities I never imagined. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had simply moved to Golden Sunset Manor that day, if I had accepted Sarah's assessment that I didn't belong in my own home. I would have survived, I suppose. I would have made friends with the other ladies, participated in the activities, adapted to the smaller space and the structured schedule. I might even have been reasonably content. But I would have missed this. I would have missed seeing Lily take her first steps in the same living room where her father learned to walk. I would have missed the satisfaction of teaching Sarah how to prune the rose bushes and the joy of watching her discover that she had a gift for growing things. I would have missed the quiet evenings when the 4 of us sit on the back deck that Robert built, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, while Lily chatters about her day and makes plans for tomorrow. I would have missed the chance to learn that families aren't just about blood and obligation, that love can grow and expand and encompass people who started as strangers, that home isn't just a place you belong, but a place you help create for others. Most of all, I would have missed the opportunity to discover that getting older doesn't have to mean becoming less important or less valued or less central to the people you love. It can mean becoming wiser, more patient, more appreciative of the moments that matter. It can mean finding new ways to contribute, new roles to fill, new relationships to build. That Tuesday morning when Sarah told me I didn't belong in this house, she was wrong about almost everything. But she was right about one thing. I didn't belong in the house she was describing. The house where I would have been a burden and an obstacle and a relic of someone else's past. I belong in this house, the one where I'm a grandmother and a teacher and a partner in raising the next generation. I belong in this house where my experience is valued, my opinions are sought, my presence is a gift instead of an obligation. I belong in this house that Sarah and Michael and I have created together. This place where the past informs the future without constraining it, where love multiplies instead of divides, where families are built through intention and effort, and the daily choice to see the best in each other. Yes, my story hasn't been easy. There were moments when I wondered if I had the strength to fight for my place in my own family, moments when it would have been simpler to accept dismissal and displacement and the gradual erasure of my importance in my son's life. But I survived. More than that, I thrived. I found a way to transform a crisis into an opportunity, a confrontation into a conversation, a threat into a chance to build something better than what we'd had before. And every morning when I wake up in this house full of voices and laughter and the controlled chaos of family life, I'm grateful that I had the courage to let Sarah talk, to listen to every cruel word she thought she needed to say, and then to hand her something that would change all of our lives forever. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept that love has limits. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is insist that there's room for everyone at the table, space for everyone in the story, place for everyone in the family. Sometimes the best way to keep what matters most is to give it away, trusting that love shared is love multiplied, that families built on choice and intention are stronger than families built on obligation and assumption. This is my house. This is my family. This is my story. And I belong here.